So it's been said, but it's worth reiterating, that the governors of Texas and Arizona have created this crisis. And the federal government has not stepped up to assist the District of Columbia. So we, along with our regional partners, will do what we've always done. We'll rise to the occasion. We've learned from border towns like El Paso and Brownsville. And in many ways, the governors of Texas and Arizona have turned us into a border town. We don't know how long this will take to resolve. We don't know how long they will continue busing. And so the right thing to do here is to be prepared to ensure we can greet every bus. We can get people off on the right foot. We can get them where they want to go. And that will ultimately help them in their immigration process.
I can't watch that and see it as anything but incredibly infuriating. It's Washington, D.C. local council member Breanne K. Nadeau. Ryan, she really did just compare Washington, D.C. to a border town, and this is from Bill Melugan of Fox. He says Washington, D.C. is a metro of 700,000 people, has had about 8,000 migrants dropped off by the state of Texas over a span of 4 to 5 months, also some from Arizona. Eagle Pass, Texas, which she name-dropped, has a population of 30,000 and gets 10,000 migrants in a week. She is comparing these like absurd numbers and wants people to sort of blame the states of Arizona and Texas for turning Washington, D.C. into a border town when they are a sanctuary city. People have pulled tweets of her talking about being a sanctuary city. Well, being sanctuary cities are one of those things.
But not like that.
Right, exactly, right? Yeah, so being a sanctuary city is one of those things that incentivizes people to make these incredibly dangerous journeys up through Mexico because they know there are places that they can go where they don't have legal citizenship, where life can be comfortable as an illegal migrant into the country. And so it's one of the incentives that's pulling people by the tens of thousands into the country, into these very dangerous places to begin with.
Instead of complaining about it, I think Democrats in Washington, the local Democrats, should use the fact that Republicans are doing this as a partisan stunt to go to national Democrats and say, look, these Republicans are doing this as a partisan stunt. We're happy to, flip the script here. Just give us a little extra funding for some nonprofit groups that'll help sort these folks out, and then we'll be fine.
Right.
Like, what is this nonsense of like trying to militarize and trying to act, like the mayor asking for the National Guard was the most embarrassing thing ever. It's like just hit up Congress for some money. Your party, while your party's in control, they're doing their CR. They're going to give Manchin his little pipeline gift. They can put in some money, and if anybody complains about it, they can say, well, look, the Republicans are doing some stunt. They traditionally have gotten a lot of immigration funding. So instead of some of that funding going to them, we're going to send some of it to Washington, D.C. As long as they keep sending migrants up here, we're going to send resources to nonprofits and social services so that they can integrate into the area. There are help wanted signs all over the place. There are classrooms that have room for students. They should just say, bienvenido.
It's a completely tragic illustration of how difficult it is to, let's say, humanely and compassionately deal with this problem. It's not an easy thing to deal with by any means whatsoever, because you have these small towns like Brownsville, which is a pretty small town, or Eagle Pass, just getting absolutely inundated, and Washington, D.C., which is part of that problem by being one of the many sanctuary cities in the country. What the point of the stunt, which I agree is a partisan stunt from Texas to Arizona, the point of what they're doing, which by the way we talked on last week's show to a News Nation reporter who said most of the migrants are very happy that they're getting bused to Washington, D.C. and New York City because it gets them over to the East Coast for free. The point of that is to say, this is what those policies, sanctuary city policies, et cetera, are doing to our towns. We do not have enough help. We are completely overrun. And here's a taste of it, and see how you react. And they're completely, even just from a sort of political standpoint, failing the test dramatically. I mean, they're playing right into the hands of the Republicans. And from your perspective, like what you were saying, it's needless. You don't have to be militarizing. You don't have to be, from their perspective, they shouldn't have to do any of that. But the fact that they feel they do, I think, is really telling.
Right, and so let's cut a deal. All right, we will fund the social services necessary to assimilate these migrants into the Washington area, or to get them, if they don't want to stay in the Washington area, they're not required to. They can, if they have relatives or friends who are in Baltimore or Cleveland or Toledo, wherever, fine, it's a free country. And in exchange, then you guys down at the border stop complaining about the immigration situation. Like they'll come over the border, get processed, and then you can put them on a bus and send them our way. Because there is a lot of work to be done if we want to continue to have a thriving 21st century economy with a declining population. Like that's what I don't understand when it comes to these democratic complaints. It's like you need people. Well, and we don't get it right now because we're seeing a lot of migration, but we're entering an era of mass population decline globally. And the countries that can stave that off and that can attract workers, attract migrants, are actually going to be the ones that are going to thrive this century and the next one, but we're too blinkered to quite see that yet.
Well, and it's because Democrats have really not wanted to deal with this horrible, inhumane asylum system where people are fleeing, in some cases with legitimate asylum claims. Really dangerous, war-torn areas in Central America are fleeing, just economically from places in South Central America and Mexico, which is not a legitimate asylum claim. And if you don't reform the system to have people legally come and work, then you're in a world of trouble. And all of these things are just subsidies to cartels. I mean, it continues to be every time, like this is the tragic paradox of illegal immigration and the issue in general. It's that every time we try to have a more compassionate policy, it ends up being a subsidy to cartels who now survive and thrive off of this huge chunk of money they get on human trafficking up to the American border because people realize that they can come to the United States and they can do X, Y, and Z. They can live in Washington, D.C., and it's a mess, and it's what's created so much violence in the region. And the way to deal with it is to fix the legal system, but there's zero political will to do that on either side.
Right, and really actually fix the guest worker program and go back to an emphasis on a guest worker program because you started having so many women and young children come across after you militarized the border so that people who previously were just guest workers, either legally or illegally, coming up, working a season, and then heading back. They didn't want to stay in the United States. We basically forced them to stay in the United States by, once they had come over, blocking their ability to go back and forth and making it so extremely costly and dangerous to go back and forth. They said, well, I guess this is where I have a job, this is where I'm going to stay, so now I need to bring my family up here. The family didn't necessarily want to come down there, so bring that back. And just, there's no political will to do anything meaningful, and it's a real tragedy, and the human costs of it are staggering. So, another story to keep a close eye on, and we will be back with more Rising right after this.